assets in which any country can generate income or GDP. We often measure GDP, look at the yearly income, but we don't look at the underlying assets that helps us to get that growth. So the sustainability of GDP growth, income growth, and poverty reduction depends on the underlying assets. And among those underlying assets, the human capital is the most important one, it's the largest one. If you neglect your, some of your capital is there, maybe invest in the stock market, so you give special treatment for the most important asset in your portfolio. You have a portfolio. If human capital is the most important asset in your portfolio, you should pay a particular attention. And I think that's what this presentation will highlight. Pakistan is not giving this most important asset. It is human. It is citizens. The necessary attention, the necessary investment. That's due for the most important asset in your portfolio. So it's like if you neglect a good that gives you the golden egg. If you neglect that, then you won't be able to sustain, you won't be able to advance, you won't be able to get what the moderator was saying. And so this is the focus of this presentation. Human capital accounts for the largest share of Pakistan's wealth, and it needs to be treated as such. And if you go to the next slide, please. In fact, here I essentially disaggregate the human capital into its components, dividing into how much of the human capital for Pakistan's wealth of human capital contributed by men and by female. So I was talking when I was making this presentation in Islamabad. If you look at the sea of yellow, that's the human capital wealth. But if you look at the wealth contribution of women, it's very little. You need a magnifying glass to read it. Anybody can read how much women contribute to human capital? Very little. No? It's about 7.9% out of the sea of the yellow human capital wealth of this country. I think you highlighted, and it's been highlighted throughout this event. The country is playing with half of its capacity. Actually, it's not even playing with half of its capacity. You will see that it's playing much lower than even its half of its capacity. So the women could contribute very little to the human capital wealth of this country, and we'll go through more in detail why. Can we go to the next one? Next. So here, this is my only methodological slide. So how we measure human capital index. World Bank came up with the Human Capital Project. It was launched in 2018 in Bali. Some of you remember. And previously, the way human capital measure was looking at the year of education, how many years of schooling. But this is a much more powerful way of measuring human capital of any country, taking into account survival. If somebody is born but they cannot survive to their 50th birthday, the contribution to their economy, human capital is zero. So Pakistan has about 7% mortality rate among children under 5. So those, unfortunately, will not be able to contribute for this country. They won't be able to see their 50th birthday. And then education. Education, not just years of schooling that kids spend, but the fact that they actually learn. Do they actually learn? Not just spend 9, 10, 12 years in school, but they actually make adjustments for quality education. And quality education, you will see, is not very, very high in Pakistan. And then health. Health, Pakistan has some of the worst health indicators. Stunting among children under 5 is very high, about 40%. So if with that kind of stunting numbers, it will be difficult to imagine a modern, well-nurtured, highly skilled labor force when kids are not getting enough nutrients and stunted. So the index will measure the productivity of a future generation, a baby born today, Maram and the generation. How much will the productivity be by the time they are ready to go to the labor market? So this is not a kitchen sink type of indicator as you may have seen, including in the human development index, just throwing stuff in and then trying to make sense. But this one is directly measuring productivity of a given person. It has economic meaning. It directly contributes to the economy, the GDP. So it's a very powerful index, but I'm not claiming that this covers every important issue, but whatever it captures is an important ingredient. But there are some other important ingredients may not be there, but this gives you a good sense of what human capital of a country will look like by capturing child survival, education, including use of schooling as well as quality, health, accounting for stunting and adult survival rates between age of 15 and 16. So somebody has to survive in order to contribute to the economy. And then you end up with the HCI, which is a measure of productivity. Can we go next one? So let me highlight these 6 numbers. I'm sure some of you have seen these numbers in different places. Child mortality rate of 7% is one of the worst globally. The stunting I mentioned, 40%, is also the worst in the sub-region, South Asia. Children who are in poverty, 79% of children are not able to read age-appropriate simple things by the time they are 10. That's 79. So only 1 in 5 kids are able to do that. That shows the quality of education. And since quality is poor, and not just quality, but there's a lot of children who are out of school. 22 million or more kids are not even at school. 5 to 16-year-old. That's one of the highest in the world, the 22 million. For Pakistan and for its level of economic development, that's extremely high number. And 81% kids are not enrolled in pre-primary early childhood education. That's the foundation that affects everything that comes after. It's a cumulative, it builds up. If they are given proper nutrition, proper care, proper education, stimulation early on, that will give a cumulative impact on the education and the health of them, and also in the income and earnings of the country as well. So 77% of women are out of labor force. You mentioned about 20%. So I think women, Pakistan achieved a relatively good job in terms of bringing women to education. But they get educated, but once they get married, because of social norms, they are essentially out of the labor force. So any investment that you make, you will see the human capital index of women and men are essentially the same, but women are not, as we saw in the earlier graph as well, they're not contributing to the human capital wealth of the country because they don't participate as much as men do in the labor market. 77% of them are out. Can we go to the next slide? This is probably the most important slide and directly related to my presentation today. So there's a fuzzy graph, but I don't know if you guys are able to see where Pakistan stands in terms of its human capital index. It's way below this diagonal line where you would expect Pakistan to be. Some provinces are doing relatively better, such as Punjab, but Baltistan, Sindh are doing among the worst globally. It's the same as say Niger in Africa. That's how far some of the provinces in Pakistan are in terms of the human capital index. I mentioned human capital index is a measure of productivity. So the productivity of an average Pakistani girl or boy by the time they turn 18 is 41%. What does that mean? Which means they only achieve 41% of their potential. Which means even if you just look at men are not fully achieving their potential. They're only achieving 41% of their potential. So Pakistan is not even playing with